Okay, so today the Department of Justice released a memo that they had sent to the acting director of the Bureau of Prisons, which oversees the federal prison system in the United States, stating that when their contracts with private prisons come up for renewal, they are either to not renew, or if they do renew it, it's supposed to be ideally significantly weaker than the contracts that they had in place before. Now, it's important to understand that when you look at the entire U.S. prison population, you're not just talking about federal prison. Okay, you're talking about federal and state prisons, but then also private prisons. So now private prisons are an outside entity. They can go to not only the federal government, but they can also go to state governments as well. So when the Department of Justice is stating that we're no longer, basically we're phasing out our use of private prisons, you have to take into account that the federal prison system really only accounts for about 15, or I'd say maybe about 5% of the entire U.S. correctional population, about 5%. Okay, now I want to read something to you here really quick, just to get the Department of Justice statement on this. So they state, the federal prison population increased by almost 800% between 1980 and 2013, often at a far faster rate than the Bureau of Prisons could accommodate in their own facilities. In an effort to manage the rising prison population, about a decade ago, the Bureau began contracting with privately operated correctional institutions to confine some federal inmates. By 2013, as both the federal prison population and the proportion of federal prisoners in private facilities reached their peak, the Bureau was housing approximately 15% of its population, or nearly 30,000 inmates, in privately operated prisons. 2013 was also the year that the Department of Justice launched its Smart on Crime initiative after identifying reforms that would ensure more proportional sentences and effective use of federal resources. Today, in part, as a result of that initiative, we are experiencing declining numbers in our prison population. We now have approximately 195,000 inmates in bureau or private contract facilities, down from a high in 2013 of approximately 220,000. So I'm gonna stop right there. Okay, so those numbers that they kind of just threw out there, I don't believe that they are including people on probation or parole, because if you look at the Bureau of Justice statistics, which has data up until at least 2014, if I'm not mistaken, those numbers state that the federal prison system has a correctional population of about 338,000 people, not 220,000 from a high of 2013, which they just stated on the Department of Justice website that I read a second ago. So it's important when we talk about this issue of the United States' prison population, we have to include not just people in local, state, and federal prison, but we also have to include people who are on probation or parole who can also have their rights infringed upon. Okay, and a lot of people focus on private prisons because, everyone's talking about the number of people who are in jail for nonviolent offenses, drug offenses and things like that, because of tough on crime policies that were set in place decades ago. Now, people who get caught up like that for nonviolent drug offenses, they can also, and many of them also, are on probation or parole. So we have to include everybody. We can't just talk about people who are in the prisons. We have to talk about everybody who's part of this correctional population that we need to decrease, because we have entirely too many people in this correctional system. I mean, this is a prison system. This is a massive prison system that we have here. So we don't want to start cutting out people and ignoring certain groups of people because we want to make the numbers look smaller than they are. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what the Department of Justice is doing, but I just like to have everybody included. I like to have all the numbers. Now, you have about 2.2 million people who are in jail or prison on all levels. Now, when you look at the top 7 entities that incarcerate people in this country, you're looking at 6 of them, which are states, and one of them is the federal prison system. Now, the federal prison system ranks at about 6 on this list. So you have states states that are incarcerating people at much higher rates than the federal prison system. So you have Texas, okay, you have California, you have Georgia, you have Florida, you have Pennsylvania. You have 6 states right there in the top 6 before you even get to the federal prison system, which is at 338,000. I mean, Texas alone imprisons nearly 700,000 people just by itself, which is at a little over 589,000. Okay, so I support this. I like it. I think it's a good thing. It's better than nothing. But we're talking about a very small percentage of the population here, of the entire prison population, that this is going to affect. So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to keep the pressure up, because we don't want small 1% decreases in the entire prison population from its high of 2007. And that's been about the rate since then. It's been about a decline of about 1% every year. We don't want a small decline like that, because we're talking about millions of people here. We need to see a plummet. Okay, and when we start talking about getting the states to do things, there are 2 ways we can fix that. Really, one way, and that involves voting. It involves getting a lot of these people out of office who aren't really trying to fix things, who aren't really trying to progressively change the system. We need progressives in power who are going to get into power, and they're going to use that power for the betterment of our communities, especially the black community. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about that. I look forward to hearing more stories like this. I was kind of disappointed by the DEA story that came out a little while ago, a few days ago, that they're going to maintain the Schedule I status of marijuana. So a lot of these people who are in prison because of drug offenses. And so when we look at the entire prison population, of course, we're not just talking about people who are nonviolent drug offenders. We're talking about people who are in there for rape, murder, assault, whatever the case may be. But the nonviolent drug offender population is a huge portion of the overall correctional population in America, and that's what we need to decrease. For the sake of America, for the sake of the soul of this country, we need to get these people out of these situations, and we need to give them their rights back, because that's the right thing to do, and ultimately that's the safer thing to do long term for this country, domestically speaking.